Before God could conceive of something other than himself, or fashion within himself some conception or other, he had first to be moved by desire. Hence, the emphasis placed upon desire by Neville. For him, it is the Savior and Redeemer. Desire for him is holy and creative, providing the dynamic impetus to the whole of life and living. It is of the nature of Godhead, which will save us from our limitations, break open the bars of our prison, and make us whole once more. Look upon your desires as the spoken words of God, and every word a prophecy of that which you are capable of being. Do not question whether you are worthy or unworthy to realize these desires, he says. Accept them as they come to you. Give thanks for them as though they were gifts. And again, every problem automatically produces its solution in the form of a desire to be free from the problem. Thus, we see that all-important role that desire plays in his system. If the desire is intense enough and can be reinforced by sufficient feeling and reach a high enough voltage, it must necessarily manifest itself objectively. If God can be moved by desire sufficiently to evolve conceptions which can, as it were, clothe themselves in form, so also can man, for God is only the consciousness of man, his awareness of being himself. Man is the primal consciousness, man is God, not as he commonly knows himself, but deep down in his heart, unconsciously. As man knows himself, he is obviously limited in manifold ways. His desires rarely fulfill themselves, for he is essentially impotent. In his unconscious self, however, in the secret place of the Most High, he is unconditioned, formless, faceless, and uncreate, and his desires come true. They are always mirroring themselves outward, projecting themselves objectively, whether he is aware of it or not. It is essential to stress this differentiation, which I believe Neville has failed to do sufficiently. Man is not God, save in the deepest levels of his soul. Man can come to this realization when he is very quiet and still. Only when the motion of the thinking mind, which is the superficial self, has been stopped altogether, can man know in that silence that I am is God. He will know that his consciousness is God, and that which he is conscious of being is the Son bearing witness of God the Father. When Neville speaks of consciousness in this way, he would have done better to have used another more specific term. Better might have been the word unconscious or even the subconscious mind, and to have reserved the word consciousness for what he calls the Son, that which man is conscious of being or calling into manifestation. Unless we differentiate in this way, we run headlong into an unescapable but highly unpleasant conclusion that we are mad. In our mental hospitals, there are hundreds and hundreds of inmates who insist quite consciously and deliberately that they are God. It is a pathetic experience to see and hear them. We must not say that their statement is any different from ours because their minds are unbalanced, that they are insane. We must avoid this pitfall more rationally. We must define our thinking terms more carefully. Neville's system contains this clarification, if not explicitly, then implicitly. It only needs to be brought out more definedly. We are not God in our awakened conscious state, but there is some part of our personalities of which normally we are not conscious, which can be called God or I am. This saves us from the horns of the horrible dilemma that we too are insane. By this differentiation, we are enabled to retain some degree of sanity and balance. The entirety of our life is rooted in the unconscious I am. Truly, as the Bible says, in him we live and move and have our being. Without God or its psychological equivalent, the deep consciousness of man, the unconscious, we have no life whatsoever. We only believe that we are masters in our own house, that we are independent, and that we do not need God. But that is because we like to flatter ourselves. We are vain and egotistical. The truth is that we are dependent to a startling degree upon the proper functioning of the unconscious psyche, and we must therefore see to it that our roots are in the right place. The various events and experiences that occur to us and the things that come to us in the course of daily life are the result of its outpicture and the projection of this unconscious psyche, which we harbor within. Even the contents of our conscious thinking and imagination spring from and depend completely upon the activity of the unconscious. All thoughts and ideation and the predispositions to certain types of experience are constantly being evolved within us, unconsciously. God and the unconscious are words. Then, that bear an equivalent meaning, and irrespective of what it really is in itself, this much is true, that we cannot live apart from it in any way. We know very little about the unconscious and only a little more about the way it works, but we assume that in some way the conscious thinking self evolves out of, but still has its roots in its darkness. In the child, we can see this growth of an ego occur at an early age, watch speech and understanding development, and see mind grow where before there was only rational responsibility. Life in the unconscious existed long before the child could say I, and when this I disappears, as it does for all of us during sleep or coma, life and spirits or God still continue as our observation of other people and our own dreams inform us. We assume that this process taking place in the individual is a rapid recapitulation of a psychic process which occurred thousands, possibly millions of years ago in the development of humanity, when mind gradually and ever so slowly made its appearance on the evolutionary scene. Mind once evolved out of the unconscious, and even today is still dependent upon it. Man's present conception of himself has evolved out of his unconditioned awareness of being, which, if called upon, can alter that conception in strange and wonderful ways. God and the unconscious are one. These terms imply the same reality, and as all things flow from God as his conception, so in the same manner the form of our environments emanates from the unconscious. As God created the world through the formulation of his own imaginative concepts, so also the unconscious creates its own world. Your world is your consciousness objectified. The tragedy of today is that we do not know this. We are out of tune with the infinite, have ignorantly lost our contact with the unconscious world of inner reality, the true source of life. Today, therefore, we are a people tragically cut off from our roots, from our creative and spiritual roots, and their upshot is that we are impotent and worthless and ill. The law of creation is first conceived and then becoming that conceived. All things evolve out of no thing. And without this sequence, there is not anything made that is made. If therefore our world, which is particular environment of any one of us, is distasteful and hateful to us, we first must remember that it is the reflection of ourselves. The world is your consciousness objectified. How to change it follows logically upon the thesis of creation. Waste no time trying to change the outside, stresses Neville. Change the within or the impression, and the without expression will take care of itself. If our environment is unfavorable, it presupposes the fact that at some former time we must have conceived it, either knowingly or unknowingly. We must first have evolved it as a possibility within. We must have mirrored it into being out of ourselves and identify ourselves within it. To create a new world, it is useless to alter the pieces of the puzzle outside. New conceptions must be formulated within, conceptions which the conceiver can handle, as it were, to form into new objective realities without. How does one make these new conceptions? How does one employ this faculty that is ours as the conceiver of all things? Consciousness, or God, is a magical faculty which has all power and can miraculously alter, change, create, and destroy forms, ideas, and beings. The foundation of all expression is consciousness. There is only one power, and this power is God, consciousness. It kills, it makes alive, it wounds, it heals, it does all things, good, bad, or indifferent. Consciousness dwells within that which it is conscious of being. I am man is the Lord and his temple. It is imperative, therefore, to call upon the aid of the deep self upon God. He magically can rearrange all the component parts of the body, the environment, and the surrounding world, which is his temple, to coincide a little bit better with the heart's desire. Only God has the vision, the power to foresee and arrange how events may deploy. We can provide the goal by formulating the wish, but the manner in which it will occur and how is entirely beyond us. That is completely in the hands of the unconscious. Its wisdom will know best how to dictate the course of future events. How this could possibly be is indicated by Jung in one of the psychological essays in the book Modern Man in Search of a Soul. There, discussing the nature of the unconscious, he says that it contains certain primordial instinctual patterns that have come down to us from the past. These patterns mark the definite processes of development and evolution. Moreover, he adds, if it were permissible to personify the unconscious, we might call it a collective human being combining the characteristics of both sexes, transcending youth and age, birth and death, and from having at his command a human experience of 1 or 2 million years, almost immortal. If such a being existed, he would be exalted above all temporal change. The present will mean neither more nor less to him than any year in the 100th century before Christ. He would be a dreamer of age-old dreams, and owing to his immeasurable experience, he would be an incomparable prognosticator. He would have lived countless times over the life of the individual, of the family, tribe, and people, and he would possess the living sense of the rhythm of growth, flowering, and decay. I do not feel it is an exaggeration then, or conviction that in any wise borders on superstition, to assume that the details of the working out of the wish may safely be left to the superior experience and wisdom of our inmost self. The real problem seems to be not that the unconscious is incapable of fulfilling the wish. More to the point is how to enlist its power on our behalf, how to employ it. You cannot serve two masters or opposing states of consciousness at the same time. Neville is adamant on this score. Taking your attention from one state and placing it upon the other, you die to the one from which you have taken it, and you live and express the one which you are united. Like Daniel, we must, insist Neville, turn our backs upon the lions confronting us and forget them in order to pray. This is the first step, then, to turn one's back on the evidence of one's senses, to ignore the world which one's mind and all faculties of one's being perceives. We have already seen that he claims the world to be merely the outside picture of an inward spiritual state. It remains, therefore, to ignore the immediate problem that one finds ahead of him, whether it be one of money, of sickness, of love, of position, or whatnot. Leave it alone, Neville urges his disciples, and turn the attention away from it. Such neglect will cause it to deteriorate, to die, whilst the newly directed attention is focused on the construction of new conceptions, which will out-mirror themselves in new worldly conditions. Put the old out of mind altogether. Reformulating one's being on an entirely divine basis, affirming oneself to be basically God, will instigate such radical alterations in the environment as one desires.